Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone, and welcome to your number one source for Native American television news, Muskogee Vision. I am Jason Salzman. I'm your host here in the Muskogee Media Studios in Okmulgee, and we want to welcome you, our audience here on Tulsa CW 1219. Got a great show today, lots of things happening out there. Not only here in tribal government, but things in the Oklahoma government affecting tribal government. So we're going to get into a lot of that right off the bat here. State Question 788 recently passed a vote last week here in Oklahoma legalizing medical marijuana here in the state of Oklahoma, a vote of the people. And a lot of people were talked to about this, who it affects. Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin, a lot of people wondered what she would do. And then we wanted to talk to our officials as well. So we went straight to the top here at Muskogee Creek Nation with our Principal Chief, James Floyd, asking him and talking about the ramifications for Muskogee Creek Nation possibly from the passage of State Question 788.
Well, as citizens of the state of Oklahoma, for those of our citizens who live in Oklahoma, the legalization or the passage of 788 leading up to the enactment of the law, the next step that I see that will affect our citizens is probably the calling of a special session by Governor Fallin, and which they will then enact regulations to allow the bill to be administered within the state. And I'm hopeful that that's successful, that they do arrive at the appropriate measures they need to have in place so that everybody will feel comfortable with it and we can move on. What we've done in terms of our code is look at our code in conjunction with the passage of the, I think it was the bill earlier this year that allows for growth associated with a university for research purposes, just for not the medical marijuana, but for hemp. And so we've proceeded somewhat into that matter because we've had talks with Oklahoma State University, but that would require code changes as well for us. However, we've not put forward any code changes that I'm aware of at this point, not from the executive branch.
Okay, and drug testing.
They would be subject to drug testing just like anybody else. They would need to show us their license. It would be very similar to what we conduct now with any employee in a random drug test. If they test positive for some substance, if they have a prescription for that substance, they're fine. So if they tested positive for THC or marijuana residue at that point, we would look to see if they have a valid license in the state of Oklahoma and for medical purposes. Well, I lived in the state of Utah when the marijuana extract oil bill was passed, and that was passed in a very conservative state because of its medical efficacy in use of preventing seizures for epileptic children in this case. And it passed, was signed into law. It was, I believe, time limited, so I believe that law expired, I think in 2016 or 2018. I can't remember now. But there are possible valid medical researched uses of marijuana. I was an employee of the Department of Veterans Affairs. When I left, there was speculation about us doing peer-reviewed research in medical efficacy of marijuana, but none had proceeded at that time. And just talking to some friends of mine lately, they're still in the VA. There's a bill in Congress that would allow them to conduct research, but at this point they've not. They've collected information about research, and the results vary widely. So I think that's what we will be looking at in the state of Oklahoma, just from my observation as someone that's been in the healthcare field, is what are its uses? And I think commonly people talk about pain, epilepsy, and things like that, cancer, and relief of pain associated with cancer with marijuana. So I think with 788, what I would be looking for is, with the legislature, what are they trying to enact to kind of limit the scope of this? Because the opposition to the bill was very much centered around, both possession in college dorms and smoking in front of us and these things, but that's regulated by other state laws. And so I think that will hopefully all clear up, and then we'll see what will move forward. So that's kind of my view on that. Well, the federal law allows tribes to grow marijuana right now. The limiting factor there has been the transportation of it off protected lands. I know that in 788, there's the state law would allow the licensing of packaging growth and transportation. So we'll be looking very closely at that to see if that's still allowable. However, in terms of the nation growing it, we've really not had any serious conversations with the council about it or the Attorney General's office to assure that that we wouldn't be raided by the DEA or something like that and lose an investment over some policy is kind of like what has been put forth by the Attorney General. We don't want to jeopardize anything that we have at this point, but I think knowing that this is an industry that has I think last year $2 billion magnitude and projected in 2 years to grow to $9 billion. We know that there's at least 1 or 2 tribes that are growing marijuana, and there's an association of tribes that are looking at this as an industry. And as I spoke previously, hemp production is what we're looking at right now, and byproducts of that is protein feed for cattle. So there's a lot of uses that are non-medical for the non-THC hemp. But again, 788 deals with the medical use and the licensing by a state board-certified physician. To date, I've not had one citizen object to it. I think now with the passage of 788, it's more in front of us, and I think that may bring out more viewpoints. But I think looking at it from the economic standpoint and seeing a business that's going to be $7 billion industry and then a $9 billion industry in 2 years, I think that it would be wise for us to look at it. We would need to separate that from the moral objections and other things and make sure we have the protections in place for the security of our property, the sovereignty of the nation is protected, and then look at it from the return on investment. And if those things work out, I think that we would probably consider something, but we've got to proceed very cautiously, and I think we'll very closely watch the proceedings of the special session of the legislature and participate as needed to make sure that we see something that would follow the intent of the voters. And like I said before, more than 500,000 people voted on this bill. It passed by more than 122,000 votes. So certainly the popularity is there. I think that can't be neglected. We hope that our legislators do a good job in following the intent of the voters in this particular issue. Again, upon trust property or upon reservations, tribes can grow marijuana. And I'm aware of 2 in the Northwest that are on reservation land. Our reservation land status is, in question, so we would then have to look at trust and restricted properties and see whether that qualifies, and then make sure that we're in compliance with, especially with DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and those things would need to be taken into consideration and work through with agreements probably in place so that we're protected before we proceed into any type of growth, in growing the marijuana or even processing it in any way.
All right, and Chief Floyd there in his comments on the passage of State Question 788, right off the bat, he said, we really need to wait and see with what Governor Fallin does, the Oklahoma legislature. Well, after this interview, June 29th actually, Governor Fallin coming out and saying there will be no special session in the Oklahoma legislature regarding this, that the rules that have been drafted by the Oklahoma Department of Health that will go before a vote are sufficient. So there won't be a special session in the House. Now that vote taking place on those rules, they are in draft mode. That will take place on July 10th. That's coming up, and that will go before the Oklahoma Department of Health Board. They're going to look at those rules and vote on them July 10th. If you want to look at those rules, you can do that at www.omma.ok.gov. They are in draft form. You can see them right there. What they're going to be voting on here in just a few days, actually. So we'll have information on that, MuskogeeMedia.com. Please stay with us on that vote. And as all of this becomes, unfolds a little bit more, we're going to have information on all of it. So 788, another thing, when we talked with the Light Horse Police Chief, Robert Hawkins, he told us the same thing that's been said by other tribal police departments and other news outlets, things like that. And he told us that basically if you're still cultivating it, possessing it in tribal lands that they patrol and they, are there arresting you, it's just going to be the same as it's always been. So basically, the federal issues there still go by federal law. And so if anything changes with Muskogee Creek Nation, it's going to have to in code and in law regarding this issue. So nothing's going to change at Muskogee Creek Nation unless the law changes, the books change here at the tribe. So there's all that information there. We will continue to develop it as it comes to us and put it on our website. So stay with us there. Stay with us here on Muskogee Vision as always. I'm not going to do my sales pitch right now, but definitely a lot of information, a big issue to cover. So please stay with us on that. Well, moving right along in our coverage, another big issue here at Muskogee Creek Nation was the festival, but even more so, a great issue, a risk at the end of the festival, the very end, actually, the early morning hours of Sunday when everybody's already gone, thank goodness, except some of our people out there in security and emergency management that had stayed over. So big storm rolls through, everybody knows about it, lots of trees down, lots of people without power. That storm comes through, and we still haven't confirmed whether it was just straight wind or a tornado. Some said both. There were some sides that were saying both. I had seen reports of the National Weather Service even confirming. So there really wasn't any finality on that. But What did remain was a lot of damage, a lot of things blown over, a lot of things to clean up, everything like that out at the festival. So we went down to Muskogee Radio this week, and Gary Fife, the legendary Gary Fife of radio lore, had Phil Booker in as risk management supervisor. He's over emergency management here at Creek Nation, and he talked about some of the ramifications of the storm out there on the festival grounds.
SJ, Stongo, Muskogee Radio, Mabu Eji Lewetskis, Gary Fife, Joho Jifkidos. Welcome to our program this morning. We've got a couple things to be sharing with you. Our town here, community of Okmulgee, got pretty hard hit by the storms the other night, and we're going to have folks in to talk about that.
Well, we shut the festival down again the Saturday night. That was the second night we had to call play and get with the vendors to shut everything down. It was after the concert, luckily, around 11:30 because of lightning. Got everybody cleared up out of there around 12:30 and stuff, and we went to the house and left it with Light Horse and the security. And then during the night, we get a phone call. I got a phone call the next morning about 7:30 that a storm had hit about 5:30, and then it looked like a tornado had hit. So we jumped up. When I got there, Chief Floyd had just pulled up, and it was raining and lightning and still storming, and things were, thrown everywhere and around. But we did buckle up pretty good and pretty quick that night before. When we left out there at 12:30, a lot of people had took tents down, so it could have been a lot worse. They knew it was fixing to storm, but we didn't know how bad, and it stormed, all night long. We left there at 12:30, raining and lightning, and this was 8 o'clock in the morning. It's still thundering and lightning, but the wind came through about 5:30 or so, 5:15, somewhere in that area that did the damage. Arbor Care had been notified. I'm the manager of Arbor Care. Alan King here with me is the supervisor of Arbor Care Services. James Nichols had called me up. He's a supervisor for emergency management, which I'm the manager of emergency management and also risk management manager. So I've got insurance claims to deal with on top of trees down and on top of emergency management responsibilities that we team up with Okmulgee County and have been working with them. Insurance-wise, I haven't got the numbers back from the adjuster. Adjuster hadn't got out to the college or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So we don't know right now.
Let me ask you, how was your weather notification coming about here? How did that happen? Who did you talk to? Who did you have lined up to give you those kind of reports?
We've at the festival during the open hours of the festival, we have several different agencies. We had the BIA's main command post, which is the latest, greatest, highest tech that you can get as far as satellite imagery, radar, and everything. Same thing they get at the National Weather Service. We're getting the same thing the meteorologists are getting. And our people that we had there are trained weather spotters, know how to read the radars, and that was in place. As far as the early morning storm that came through, weather apps on our phone alerted us that there was a severe thunderstorm warning around 5:16. That was about the time it was hitting. My understanding that a radar facility got hit, and that kind of delayed getting the message out. That's what I've been told. I don't know if that's confirmed or anything. And I just got a phone call at the house. I know they have the assessment teams that have been out for at least 2 days now doing assessments, and that'll get put together. I know it's been we were under a state of emergency right now, and that's what's the first thing that they do when a situation like this goes on, and that'll get looked at, and there's a threshold that it has to hit to be declared a disaster, and dollar amounts, and I don't know if it'll hit that amount or not. I've got a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 to try to organize all the departments under the Department of Interior a little bit better. We're kind of trying to restructure what we have, what we do, what we can respond to as far as helping other departments out within the tribe, so you don't have to, you know that that's what we can do. You can use their front end loaders, you can use dump trucks from other departments to come and assist us. Right now we're using other agencies, and everybody works together, and we've got a networking, system put together where everybody works together. At the festival out there was probably 3 or 4 different counties that come down and volunteer work to help us at our festival, emergency management. different state agencies and then BIAs, federal agencies come down and put up, the Department of Homeland Security, Oklahoma Emergency Management, and all of them are in the effort at the Omniplex during the festival every year. And we work with them year round, so we've got a good working relationship at the tribe with other tribes and with Choctaw Nation, Chickasaw Nation. They had workers up during our festival helping us out also.
Our last feature of the week is a Muskogee Vision profile with new Muskogee Creek Nation controller, George Taylor.
Well, my name is George Taylor. I'm from Claremore, Oklahoma. Upon graduating from Claremore High School, I knew the importance of two things, of money and education, and sometimes those two things are really associated with each other. And my parents didn't have enough money for me to go to school, so I financed my own education through a series of loans and working during the summer. But once I graduated, I took a job with Texaco in corporate financial reporting. Then I was an internal auditor for Mobil. I actually worked for Enron, and yes, that Enron in Houston. But I spent about 15 years in oil and gas and 10 years as a CFO for a private company in Atlanta. And then my dad, who's a Methodist minister, he was here in Okmulgee, it's a creek. He got really sick, so I moved back to Oklahoma, and then he passed away within a year. But I've always wanted to work for a tribe in a financial position, and I thought with my experience now, it's over 35 years of professional experience at different levels, I thought my experience could really lend itself to the tribe, and I could help the Muskogee Nation not just grow, but to actually thrive. Oh, for sure. I mean, going from college as a college graduate and going into the professional world, there's no transition. You don't have any classes that prepare you to go from student to professional life. So that in itself is a big step, and you learn a lot. But sadly enough, most of my learning experiences have been watching how people do things in an incorrect environment or method. And so I've learned just to do the opposite. And the biggest thing is talking to people and listening to people. Most people in the business world just don't do that. And me, coming from a background with Muskogee Indians, my mom was a nurse at the Claremore Indian Hospital for about 40 years. And my dad being a minister, they were all about talking with people. So I really wanted to bring that in focus in my career, because I think you really learn a lot just by listening to people. But in the different environments in oil and gas, big corporations, they're very strict on a lot of things. But when you get to smaller environments, you have a lot more freedom. And I've always thought education is a key. And along the way, I passed the Certified Public Accountancy exam. Then I passed the Certified Payroll Professional exam because I worked for a payrolling company. And then I went back to a more structured environment, and I actually received my MBA from Oklahoma Christian University in 2013. And that I don't recommend for anybody to try to do later in their career, but it was a good experience. Well, my initial reaction is coming back to the complex, just how large it's gotten and how big of a business the Muskogee Nation actually has. And one thing I've always thought is the gaming side, Native American tribes should take advantage of that while they can, because you don't know when it's going to end. You have several taxing authorities that could make it not economically feasible to continue that. And I've always thought that the tribes should fund social services as well as education. So right now it's just a learning experience, getting to know people, personalities, seeing where the tribe wants to go, and just assisting them in the financial aspect. Well, for this particular staff here, it is just getting to know people. But one thing I wasn't prepared for was all the travel and the meetings. I mean, it's like our meeting Monday, I just said my time is consumed with meetings. But I do try to get around and get to know everybody, and that process will still continue, and I want to talk to everybody individually, see what they like, what they don't like, if there's some things we can change for them, because I think having an employee base that is happy, they're more productive, and they're more prone to excelling at their job. So give those people the resources they need, and then give them the flexibility to actually do their job. But as far as James, Chief Floyd, and all the things he has on the table, I'm really impressed at that. And I don't know if anybody's seen the master plan for the complex, the tribal complex, and the other things, and getting the financing in place. And he is more of a forward thinker, because a lot of times people look at the basic financing like with banks or whatever, but there is another financing instrument that's out there, and it's bond funding, which we are looking at, which over the term of the bond would save us $600,000, $700,000 in interest alone. But to see his vision, and his background is with health, so he's more of that one-on-one, interested in people and programs. I really like that. Typically in oil and gas, especially where I started, there's not a whole lot of movement. So if you stay with the corporation for a long time, typically you're not going to move up the ladder. So in oil and gas, you really get recommended positions from other people and other companies. But this is more or less a dream position for me, because all this education that I've gotten, all the knowledge and experience I've gotten from other corporations, companies, is really going to help the tribe. And for me, this would be a terminal position, being, I'd like it to be my last professional position before I retire. I'm just really glad to be here, and glad to see that the tribe is doing well with their money. As before, I'd worked a little bit with Colorado River Indian tribes, and I worked with 7 tribes in southwest Oklahoma, and that's not always the case. That those tribes are not always financially solvent. So I'm just glad for the Muskogee Nation that they have the leadership in place that does have that financial acumen, and I think the citizens will benefit from that, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Hey everyone, we hope you loved the show this week. Stay with us on MuskogeeMedia.com, and also on all of our social media sites and our YouTube. Click the red button, subscribe, get our content on demand. For Jared Moore, I'm Jason Salzman. This has been Muskogee Vision. We'll see you guys next time.